My name is Jack. For 5 years, I gave everything to a mid-sized tech firm I thought was my second home. I wasn't the flashiest employee, but I was dependable. I stayed late, handled the problems no one else wanted, trained the new hires, and kept the wheels turning even when management made mistakes. My old manager once told me, "Jack, if everyone here had your work ethic, we'd be unstoppable." I believed him. For a long time, I believed that loyalty meant something. Then came Karen. She arrived one Monday morning like a storm in heels, confident, sharp, and smiling in that way that didn't quite reach her eyes. Management introduced her as our new department manager, the fresh energy the team needed. I welcomed her, shook her hand, and even helped her get up to speed. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was helping build the weapon she'd later use against me. At first, Karen was charming. She praised my organization, asked questions, leaned on my experience. But the tone changed within a few weeks. In meetings, she'd interrupt me mid-sentence. She started questioning every suggestion I made, twisting my words to sound old-fashioned or resistant. Once, after I proposed a process improvement that had saved us time for years, she smiled sweetly and said, "That might have worked 5 years ago, Jack, but we're moving forward now." A few coworkers laughed. I laughed too, but it stung. Soon, the laughter stopped. Deadlines started shrinking. My reports were sent back with comments like "needs more energy" or "lacks innovation." I didn't understand what that even meant. I started staying even later, fixing, adjusting, rewriting, to meet her standards. It didn't matter. Nothing I did was good enough. Then one day, I noticed something strange. A project I'd led from start to finish, one that had been praised by clients, was suddenly listed under Karen's name in a performance review draft. I thought it was a clerical error. When I brought it up, she brushed it off. "Oh, just paperwork. I'll correct it later." She never did. At first, I told myself I was imagining it. Maybe I was just being sensitive. But the pattern grew clearer. My name started vanishing from shared documents. Decisions I'd made were rewritten to look like hers. And the whispers began, "Jack's losing touch. Jack's slowing down." I'd built my reputation on being dependable, and now that same reputation was being turned into a weakness. Karen wanted me gone, and she was doing it quietly, piece by piece. Still, I didn't fight back. I told myself professionalism would protect me. I thought, if I just keep doing my job, the truth will win out. Then came the promotion. A new position opened, team lead for a system migration I'd practically designed myself. Everyone assumed it was mine. Even HR congratulated me in advance. I worked nights preparing proposals and training notes for when I'd take over. I was proud. It felt like my years of effort were finally paying off. Then, one Friday morning, Karen called a meeting. The team gathered around the long conference table, tired but excited. She stood at the front, smiling like she'd just won an award. "I'm thrilled to announce," she said, "that after much consideration, we've chosen the new team lead for our upcoming migration project, my cousin, Daniel." The room went silent. I actually laughed for a second because I thought she was joking. But when I saw the way she looked at me, smug, satisfied, I knew she wasn't. I felt the blood drain from my face. Daniel looked nervous, mumbling something about how honored he was. Karen clapped. "Jack," she said sweetly, "I hope you'll mentor him through the transition. You've got so much to teach him." I nodded. My throat was dry. Everyone looked at me, waiting for a reaction. I forced a smile. "Of course," I said. "Happy to help." Inside, something cracked. For 5 years, I'd worked myself to the bone for that company. I'd skipped birthdays, anniversaries, vacations, everything, for the sake of my career. And now, my loyalty had been repaid with humiliation. That night, I sat in my car in the empty parking lot long after everyone else had gone home. The building lights flickered off one by one until it was just me and my reflection in the windshield. I thought about quitting right there. Just walking away and leaving it all behind. But another thought surfaced, quieter, colder, no. Not yet. If Karen wanted to play dirty, I could play smart. The next day, I walked into the office as if nothing had happened. I smiled, exchanged greetings, and pretended my insides weren't screaming. I needed to appear calm, confident, untouchable, but inside, I was anything but calm. That night in the parking lot, I'd made a decision: I would not be a victim. Not quietly, not publicly, not ever again. If Karen thought she could dismantle my reputation, she hadn't counted on patience, preparation, or precision. The first step was documentation. I began saving every email, every project update, every report I had ever contributed to. If Karen tried to take credit for something I did, I wanted proof I had done it first. I archived versions of documents, screenshots of spreadsheets, timestamps of every modification. Slowly, I built a digital fortress of evidence. But that wasn't enough. I needed to understand her patterns. I observed her quietly: which tasks she ignored, which deadlines she missed, which projects she tried to rewrite. I noted inconsistencies, exaggerations, and outright lies. Every detail was a puzzle piece. I was assembling a picture of the truth, piece by piece. I also tested the waters with colleagues I trusted. A few, cautiously, confirmed what I had suspected: they had seen her take credit for work I had done, and they had heard her make offhand comments undermining me, but most were silent. Rumor was dangerous in our office, and I didn't want to give her any chance to learn about my investigation. Days turned into weeks. Each project Karen touched left behind breadcrumbs. Files she altered, meetings she misrepresented, tasks she forgot to assign. I kept meticulous notes, spreadsheets, and email chains. Slowly, my folder grew into a damning record of her manipulation. I told myself, patience. Timing is everything. Then came the incident that finally tipped the scales. Karen had approved an urgent client update without verifying the test results. Within hours, the system crashed. The client called, frustrated, demanding answers. Karen tried to spin it, naturally, shifting blame to whoever had last touched the files. I had the logs. Every edit, every approval, every overlooked warning was documented. I could prove she had authorized the change. I didn't act immediately. I waited, watching her flounder and lie to HR, watching the cracks appear in her carefully curated facade. That weekend, I organized my evidence into one comprehensive archive. Each file, each email, each discrepancy meticulously labeled and cross-referenced. There was no emotion in it, just facts. The story of everything she had done, from the moment she joined the company, laid bare in digital clarity. By Monday morning, I was ready. Monday morning arrived with the ordinary hum of printers and the smell of burnt coffee. I walked through those doors carrying a quiet thing, a folder of truth that no one could reasonably dismiss. I had rehearsed nothing. I didn't need to. The facts spoke for themselves. I started my day as usual, catching up on messages, answering a few quick questions, pretending like any other week. But under the surface, everything felt different. I had that steady, hollow calm that comes when you finally decide to stop being helpless and start being deliberate. At 10 a.m. I sent a single email to the executive board. Nothing sensational in the subject line, just, review of Q3 projects, documentation attached. I kept it clinical. No accusations, no flourish. Inside, I wrote a succinct summary: what projects I'd led, the timelines, the outcomes, and a clear note that I had attached the change logs and version history for transparency. At the bottom I added, without drama, for your reference, I've included recent change requests initiated by our department manager, Karen X. Then I attached the folder. I didn't blind copy anyone. I put it where it belonged, into the hands of the people who could actually do something. I hit send and felt the familiar, small shock of finality, like dropping a stone into still water and watching the ripples expand outward. I went to my desk. I poured coffee. I did my work. I answered a question about a deployment window like nothing was happening. Karen passed my desk at some point and gave me one of those practiced smiles corporate people use when they want an audience to think everything is fine. I smiled back. Inside, my pulse moved in a different rhythm now, steady, patient, certain. The ripples began quickly. By late morning, the CEO's assistant called me into a private meeting and asked a handful of clarifying questions: dates, file names, the sequence of events. I answered in the same neutral tone I'd used in the email, facts only. She thanked me and said the board would review the documentation. By lunchtime, people started whispering. Small clusters formed by the water cooler. The murmurs escalated into pointed glances when Karen walked by. She tried to keep her composure, but I saw the micro-expressions, tiny twitches, a blink too long, the way her jaw tightened when she thought no one was watching. For the first time since she'd arrived, she looked like someone without a script. At 2 p.m. HR appeared at her office door. An hour later, a security guard was discreetly stationed near the elevator. By 3:30, Karen was called into the CEO's office. I sat at my desk, keyboard humming, and watched the corridor like an observer of some slow-moving, inevitable scene. An hour passed and then another. My inbox filled with polite notes. Thank you for your transparency, we appreciate your thoroughness, please stand by for further questions. I answered them, again with facts, with calm. Around 5 p.m. the office buzzed with trepidation. Nobody knew exactly what would happen, but they all felt the electric charge of a wrong about to be righted. At 5:30, Karen emerged from the executive suite carrying a small box. Her eyes looked hollow. No one applauded. No one shouted. A few people lowered their heads to avoid a scene. She moved with the awkward, rehearsed gait of somebody who has rehearsed their denial for months and is now forced to take it all back in a cardboard box. I watched her pass my desk. In that moment, something that had been coiled inside me loosened, not with triumph, not with glee, but with the unadorned satisfaction of someone who had kept faith with the truth. She met my gaze for a fraction of a second. There was an unreadable look, shame, maybe, or panic, or a fierce, private calculation that didn't land. The fallout accelerated. Investigations opened. Names that had been whispered in confidential conversations surfaced. His cousin's promotion was reviewed and then halted. The CEO held an all-hands meeting the next morning where he acknowledged administrative oversights during the management transition and promised a thorough audit. No one said Karen's name out loud. No written statement named her. But everyone knew. I was called into the CEO's office the following day. He was quieter than I expected. He didn't look like a man who had been blindsided as much as one who had been denied something and, when shown proof, had to correct it. Jack, he said, we owe you an apology. We should have listened to people sooner. You showed courage in bringing this forward the right way. He offered me the team lead position that had been handed to his cousin. It was an odd moment, one I had imagined many times in the bleak hours after the promotion was announced. I thought of the long nights, the missed birthdays, the small sacrifices that had added up to this. I thought too of the quiet file folders on my hard drive that had made this possible. I appreciate it, I said, and I felt the words land cleanly. Thank you. But I'd like to stay in my role for now. I want things to stabilize before any changes. He nodded, perhaps surprised, perhaps relieved. Months passed. The audit discovered irregularities not only in the department Karen had run but in her previous roles at other companies where she had worked. Patterns repeated across organizations, small manipulations that accumulated into professional advantage. The company instituted stricter documentation procedures. We began to run version-controlled repositories for everything. Processes I had suggested years earlier were finally adopted, though now they bore the visible imprimatur of executive concern rather than the quiet footnotes I had once written. But the real change wasn't in policies or promotions. It was in the way people treated each other. Private conversations were no longer tinted by the fear of being the next target. People were more careful, kind, in too many cases, for the first time in a long while. It felt less like victory and more like restoration. There's a strange thing about justice, especially when you engineer it with facts rather than fury. It's tidy in a way that anger is not. It doesn't singe the edges of your life. It simply rearranges them. I didn't dance in the hallway or revel publicly. There was no vindictive speech, no triumphant post. I let the truth do its work. In the weeks after Karen left, people came to me, quietly, with stories. A junior developer told me how Karen had taken credit for a migration plan he'd spent months working on at a previous job. An ex-colleague from another company emailed to say she'd seen similar behavior years earlier. The evidence was thicker than I had imagined, and together, it formed a pattern that made the earlier humiliation look less like a personal failure and more like a structural problem that had to be corrected. That realization changed me. For a while, I had replayed the promotion announcement like a record stuck on the same groove, hearing only humiliation and betrayal. Once the dust settled, the narrative shifted. The hurt was still there, but it was clearer now. Out of context, what had happened was not a reflection of my worth. It was someone else's strategy. People kept asking me how I stayed so calm, how I could sit on evidence for weeks and not explode. The truth was simple and practical: patience is underrated. Rushing into confrontation gives your enemy the advantage of preparing their lies. Quietly building a case leaves no room for theatrics. Facts are indisputable, rumors are combustible. I also learned about professional courage. It takes a certain nerve to step into a room full of people who might look at you as if you were making trouble. For weeks I risked being labeled a troublemaker myself. There were quiet moments, HR asking me if I had proof, colleagues cornering me in the hallway to ask if I was sure I wanted to do this. But each time I thought of the long nights and the quiet theft of my work, I felt steadier. I remembered that I wasn't doing this for revenge as much as restitution. A surprising byproduct of the whole ordeal was how many people said they admired the way I handled it. They told me I had shown integrity. I was flattered, but I didn't feel heroic. I felt prudent. I had given them something rarer than spectacle: certainty. When people can see the truth laid out clearly, their instincts change. They stop gossiping and start correcting. Weeks turned to months, and normalcy returned. The company's culture shifted toward greater transparency. We adopted workflow tools that tracked edits and approvals. My quiet suggestions began to receive polite attention, then real adoption. Opportunities opened, not as a result of spectacle, but because the environment had changed enough for competence to rise again. And yet, I won't pretend it was painless. Karma didn't erase the sting of that Friday when the promotion was announced. There are scars that don't go away just because the story resolves in your favor. Some nights I still thought about the humiliation. But those nights came less and less frequently. Time, combined with truth, has a way of softening the sharpest edges. People sometimes ask what I would have done differently. Would I have announced the evidence more theatrically? Would I have confronted Karen face to face? There are versions of the story where that happens, where I storm in, slam the documents on the CEO's desk, and speak truth to power in a single cinematic moment. It's appealing in films and late-night monologues, but reality rarely rewards theatrics as reliably as it does thoroughness. The board needed clarity, not drama. The company needed an audit, not a spectacle. And so, I continued my life. I came in, did my job, took my lunch, and slowly reclaimed the dignity that had been chipped away. I let the policies I'd long advocated for be implemented. I mentored new hires more intentionally, making sure their contributions were visible and credited. I made a habit, early on, of archiving my own work. It's a small thing, but those small things compound. Then, one afternoon, months after the dust had settled, I received an unexpected email from someone high up in another department. They had read the board's summary and wanted to connect, to discuss a leadership role opening in another branch that would align with my skills and experience. It wasn't the sudden, vindictive payoff of a revenge fantasy. It was a quiet, professional acknowledgement that my work mattered. I accepted the meeting. That, I suppose, is the thing about justice served. Sometimes it doesn't arrive wrapped in fireworks. Sometimes it arrives as the steady recognition you were originally denied, a polite invitation, a considered offer, a rebalanced ledger. And in small, private moments, I acknowledged that I felt different. For the first time in months, I felt respected again. And better yet, I felt free. Karma didn't hit overnight. But when it did, its timing was perfect. Sometimes revenge isn't about cruelty. It's about fairness. It's about restoring balance. I didn't become the villain, I simply refused to stay the victim. What do you think? Was I too harsh, or was justice served? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this story and want more tales of poetic justice, hit like and subscribe. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. I'll see you next time, when someone else finds out the hard way that you don't mess with the wrong person.